Hi, welcome to another episode in our video series on National Education Policy 2019, the draft version. In this video, I am going to focus on Chapter 5, Chapter 7 and Chapter 8 of NEP 2019. Chapter 5 deals with teachers and teachers related policies, a very important chapter. Chapter 7 deals with a new concept of aggregation of schools that has been recommended called the school complex. We'll cover that briefly. And Chapter 8 deals with regulation and accreditation. Let's take Chapter 5 first. One of the key recommendations provided in the draft policy is that NTA is going to play a very central and important role in the capacity building of school teachers by way of assessments and recruitment support. What does that mean? The teachers' recruitment is likely to be driven by the National Testing Agency that has been created, and as we know currently Vineet Joshi heads that, an IAS officer who was formerly the chairperson of CBSE, and NTA will come up with a method of recruiting teachers through an assessment, and that would be applicable for primary, middle and senior school teachers. It is also likely that assessments will be done centrally even for the in-service examinations and promotions. Those conversations are happening in various forums. As far as the practice of para-teachers is concerned, which is a very highly prevalent practice right now, there is a very clear recommendation that the practice of para-teachers will be ended by the time we get to 2022, which means there are 3 years for the entire government teacher ecosystem to build capacity in terms of number of people, train and certify them, do the capacity building so that the para-teachers practice is ended by 2022. One or two more important recommendations as far as teachers are concerned is that there is going to be a complete ban of the government school teachers being used for any other government work, including the election duty. This is likely to have a far-reaching implication and will deal with a bit of a disgruntlement or dissatisfaction in a very visible way. On the topic of teacher education, the 4-year B.Ed program is likely to be introduced across all the institutions which fall in Tier 1 or Tier 2 or even Tier 3 of higher education institutions. Also, it is recommended that there will be a 1-year rapid 1-year training program to become a teacher if you have done any other undergrad program of at least 3 years. So, in all, if you look at Chapter 5, there are reasonably well articulated and thought through measures about improving the quality of teachers through pre-recruitment assessments, in-service training and capacity building for them to deliver their services. It also talks about uncluttering their work so that they can focus entirely on their job. This is the summary of Chapter 5. Let me cover a couple of points under the head curriculum and pedagogy, which will also come in another video that we will do on Chapter 4, but I am picking up some of the relevant things that are relevant to schools. The interesting point that NEP 2019 makes is about how do we de-stress or reduce the import of high stakes exam that happen at grade 10 and grade 12. So the 10 plus 2 has been sought to be abolished or replaced with a 5 plus 3 plus 4. So the last part of 4, the recommendation is that the students would do approximately 24 courses or 24 courses, which includes 15 subjects, 3 languages, and one of the languages will be at the level of literature. So if your mother tongue is Punjabi or a Telugu, you do that, you do Hindi, you do English. However, one of these 3, you also do it at the level of higher level of literature paper. I think the noises that we are hearing from various quarters about the 3 language policy is all known to all of us. My own personal view is that, as proven through many scientific studies, the more the number of languages a child or a youngster learns, the better are some aspects of brain development, and this is one of the strengths of Indian education system. We must preserve it and give as many languages as a student would want to learn, with a minimum of 3. The board exam tyranny is sought to be reduced, and one of the far-reaching impacts of this could come from one of the recommendations. It's tucked away in one of the paragraphs and not elaborated enough, but what it says is that the National Testing Agency, which does all the entry gate examinations to get into an IIT or a medical school or a CAT or whatever, all of them will move to NTA. The testing agency work will all get centralized at NTA, which means there is an assertion that over a period of time, the NTA scores that will be given to students in class 10th and class 12th will be accepted for higher education admissions and also will be accepted by the employers. Which means you just might find that the exit gate exam and the entry gate exam might coincide, and that becomes independent of the teaching organization. So Central Board of Secondary Education, it deals with curriculum, it should not deal with testing, assessment. NTA will deal with the assessment. Any autonomous college or institutions that is asking for enrollments, it subscribes to a test done by NTA, and all the tests that are conducted across India is likely to be centralized and brought to NTA, which becomes a super specialized testing agency. A very unconnected possibility that I see is the role of NTA as we move into the future. And I can see a distinct possibility of many universities across the world who are intent upon attracting the Indian students. They will begin to subscribe to Indian examinations, and when the Indian examinations such as IIT JEE or a CAT or a NET or a NLU exam called CLAT, when all of these are done by NTA, there is a great likelihood that hundreds of universities globally will start subscribing to the Indian entrance exams to make it easier for them to recruit students from India and for Indian students to apply to them at a very, very nominal cost, or quite literally no additional cost. So these are some of the over crystallized summaries of chapter 5 that I have shared with you. Let's move to chapter 8, which deals with regulation and accreditation. One of the things that it talks about is the creation of state school regulatory authority, and this will take away the role of Directorate of School Education in every state, which was doing the role of both the operator and regulator. He would operate the schools, but also he does the regulation. That is likely to be separated. So you would have the Directorate of School Education in a state now becoming a pure operator of government schools, which means they are responsible for the delivery and outcomes of quality of education. Whereas all the government schools and all the private schools will be regulated by a state school regulatory authority. And one of the intents expressed in this chapter is that both public and private schools will be measured with very similar, if not exact, assessment standards. They're not going to be two different ways of treating a private school differently from a government school. I think this is a welcome recommendation and is likely to find a lot of favor amongst the private school education players who always feel victimized by a very partial government regulating agency which penalizes them for just being private. One of the things that the private schools must guard against, if this comes true, is the next recommendation, which says that the price fixing or the fee fixing for every subsequent year will be determined by a formula which will be approved by the SSRA, and the logic or the justification given is that the switching costs from a private school to another school for a consumer or a family is extremely high. If you randomly increase the price, not that this would be a practice, a lot of ankush has been already put on this over the last few years, but this is sought in very clear terms that the fee fixing randomness will have to be removed, because the consumer or the family or the student is completely at the mercy of a school once the child is put there, and switching of a school when the child is in grade 8 or grade 9 to another school is not easy in terms of finding a seat elsewhere, or even in terms of adjustments and other softer reasons for the sake of the child. So that in a sense is the summary of chapter 8, regulation and accreditation. And just to wind up this particular chapter, it is good to know that the policy seeks to give a quasi-judicial status to the SSRA in order to dispense with any conflicts or complaints that might come from the local districts on any grounds. Before I close this video, I'll take a minute to talk about chapter 7, which is about effective resourcing and governance. And I'll just highlight one point in this chapter which talks about creation of school complexes. As we know, there are very many primary schools in any vicinity of 5 to 10 kilometer radius, and then there are fewer number of mid-level schools, and then even a few senior schools. And in order to help all of them to leverage one another, whether it is for infrastructure or teaching resources or high quality teachers available, the entire concept of school complex is created, wherein all the schools that fall in the radius of 5 to 10 kilometers, they will form a school complex, and they will try and build a lot of interdependability of resources, problem solving, advice, mentoring, and so on. And if these schools are even connected with private schools or even a university to play the role of a mentor, that is likely to happen here in the school complex phenomenon. As we have covered in another video, the higher educational institution distribution is being taken to one good quality institution per district and trying to reach 600 to 700 districts. Now imagine that the school complex is lying in the vicinity of that tier 1 or tier 2 university. There is that mentoring that is likely to come from that university as envisaged in this policy, if you do synthesis of what is being said in different chapters, they appear disconnected, but there seems to be a thought that might convert into a on the ground model over the next few years. Thank you very much. I hope this was of some use to you, and I look forward to your feedback at my email ID, and happy to collate all those and relay it to the appropriate regulatory or the policy making bodies. Thank you very much.